What's going on YouTube? Coming at you today with another tutorial on React hooks, and today we're going to be covering the useEffect hook. Now this can actually be used in a couple of different ways. I'm going to show you kind of the more basic way today just to get you started. And if you watch the useState tutorial, you'll remember this little app that we set up here with these headers and the clickable counter up there that just changes with useState. So we're going to continue with this little app just to do the demonstration with useEffect today. And this is the code from the last time that we worked on this. We've got the count and set count. We've got header and set header. So these are the variables count and header that we're working with today in state. And so basically we're going to do some stuff that you can't do by just using useState, and we're going to do stuff that requires what's called an effect or a side effect, depending on how you want to name it. This hook, useEffect, as said by React's official documentation, is basically a few different lifecycle methods or equivalent to them rolled up into one. So up there at the top we've got the title that we're going to want to change for the entire app in the tab, and that cannot happen during the return. It's going to happen after, because inside the return would be too soon. So useEffect actually runs once every time the component has finished rendering. So it's basically like component will unmount, component did mount, and component did update all in one. So here we're going to write our first one, do a little arrow function. useEffect is going to basically just work like this every time. So right now we're just going to change the title, which should show up in the tab. And what are we going to change it to? Let's just say currently. Yeah, okay. Currently on header, so we're going to use the header, and this is again going to happen every time that the component finishes rendering, basically. So this is like those different lifecycle methods rolled into one, because it happens whether it updates, whether it's initially. So there, first is up there in the tab. If we click second or third, it'll change to that. And what you'll notice is because it happens after the render, it actually changes a tiny bit after you'll actually see it on the page. So click boom, and yeah, it happens a little bit after the page actually renders whatever's going on in the component, because useEffect is designed that way to happen at the end. So we can come back here, and that's great. We pretty much want that to happen every time something changes. You can also use it for like really common things would be like API calls, making fetch requests. This is stuff that would be great to do in useEffect, or even just console logs. So that's what I'm going to show you right now, just to keep things simple, since this is potentially your first time looking at useEffect. And right now we're going to write a separate useEffect, and inside there we're just going to do a console log. And why don't we use the count variable in state this time? So I don't know, I guess we can just do, let's just say that we increased count to whatever count is. So we'll just stick that in there. Alright, cool. So because this happens on every re-render, basically, this isn't going to work the way that we want right now, and it's actually going to cause us some loss of performance, which won't be noticeable because this app is so small, but I'll tell you more about that in a second. So right now, that's all fine, don't worry about that. We'll just clear out the console right quick. Okay, console's cleared out. We want to see increased count to 1. Alright, great. So we get that when the count updates, but actually we get it when the entire component updates. So if we click on these headers, because it's re-rendering, it's actually going to console log that as well, but that's not really a time where we would want to do that log. So not only is that kind of an inappropriate time, but it's also less performance. So what we're going to do in order to create basically like a condition for it to do this useEffect, we're just going to destructure the variables being used inside of useEffect in this array here. So the only one we're using is count, and what this is going to do is tell this useEffect to only happen if count changes. Otherwise, it's not going to do this useEffect. So that means that when we click those headers, it should ignore this useEffect because the count has not changed when we don't click on the count. So yeah, not too complicated. Let's go back here, and as you can see, when we click on these headers, now it does not console log the string with the count in it. But if we click on the counter, it does the way that we intend it to. So again, this is actually going to increase the performance of your app because this is only happening when that variable changes. Otherwise, this is just a part of your code that doesn't get run because it doesn't need to. And so yeah, that is essentially the basics of useEffect. Like I said, there are other slightly more complicated things that you can do with it that I just don't really think I can show you with an app example that's quite as simple as this. So I would probably go straight to the React documentation to learn a little bit more about that part. But just to give you kind of an idea, if you want to start researching this yourself, or maybe I'll get more into depth in one of my next videos. But basically what's going to happen with this other way to use useEffect is that you over here basically you'd be sticking a return function that will clean up what happens after the first part of the useEffect runs. You would only need to do this in certain instances, like if you need to subscribe to something and then unsubscribe later or something like that. Again, it's just a somewhat more complicated use case, but useEffect and useState together should pretty much be able to handle most of your concerns with React without having to use class components at all. So that is pretty much what I've got for you today, guys, and I want to keep things brief for you and digestible. So I hope that you got something out of this video. If you like it, please like and subscribe. And as always, I'm going to wish you some happy programming.